In a world where heroes reign supreme, a powerless boy finds himself cast aside by his team, deemed useless and unworthy of their ranks. With nowhere to turn, no money to his name, and not a single combat skill to rely on, he is left to navigate a harsh reality where survival itself feels like an impossible battle. We see that somewhere high in the mountains, a small village was living in fear, getting torn apart again and again by a monstrous Fenrir, ranked S-class. Eventually, with nothing left to lose, the villagers poured all their savings into hiring a legendary SS-Rank adventurer team to end the nightmare. The members of Flaming Dragon Fang are among the most feared adventurers alive, each with their own brutal specialty. But then there's Kurt, and the only damn thing he's ever been useful for is chores, so he hides behind a wall, just trying to stay out of harm's way. But the first unlucky one the Fenrir charges at when it appears is Kurt, so he gets blasted through the air like trash, and the rest of the team steps in to handle the real fight. Golnova then shouts at Bandana to pin the creature down, so she flicks out her wire and wraps it around the beast. But within seconds, the Fenrir smashes her into a wall so hard it sounds like something broke. Normally, that'd be the end of her story, but with Marlefist nearby, she's back on her feet in no time and jumps back into the mess without even blinking. This time, she anchors herself to a tree to keep from being thrown again, giving Golnova the chance he needs to strike at the Fenrir's skull. So he launches into the air and engulfs the monster's head in flames with his sword. The villagers are beyond grateful for the Fenrir's defeat, so they scrape together what little they got left to throw a feast for the party, even though they're barely surviving. But even with that, Golnova the jerk can't stand this boring peasant food. He tells Kurt to make something halfway decent instead, and Bandana asks him to make it special, since today's the last time they'll be tasting anything he cooks. Kurt has no clue what the hell they're talking about, so he turns to Golnova for answers, and the jerk tells him flat out that he's being kicked from the team starting today. Kurt protested, asking if he'd done something wrong, but Golnova tells him the truth. Kurt's just not enough. Sure, he handles chores, makes food, and cleans up, but when it comes to battle, he's dead weight. And also, they're only allowed 4 members in the squad, so if they want to make room for someone who can actually fight, preferably a powerful mage or at least a competent warrior, he's gotta go. Kurt begs them to let him stay. His voice cracks, and he's clearly trying not to cry. But Golnova's had it, so he kicks Kurt in the stomach to shut him the hell up. He's tired of hearing him weeping, and they don't need him anymore because they've made their choice, so that's the brutal end of it. The day after getting kicked out, Kurt walks away from the village with nothing but the clothes on his back, no idea where he's going, and a wallet emptier than his future. He just keeps moving, dragging his feet, until he ends up in the city of Samela. He's got a few coins left, so if he doesn't find work soon, he's completely screwed. Eventually, he spots a temp agency that doesn't look too shady and decides to give it a shot. As he walks in, a receptionist named Kershel gives him a quick look and asks whether he's here to hire someone or to find work. Kurt tells her he's looking for a job, and she nods, tells him they'll need to do an interview and a standard aptitude test to get started. She starts with the usual questions, his name, age, and where the hell he's from. Kurt replies, "My name is Kurt Rockins, I'm 15 years old, and I come from a small village nestled in the Sheen Mountains called Hast." Kershel is taken aback as she had never heard of such a remote village, but she quickly moves on to his work experience. Kurt explains that he was once a member of Flaming Dragon Fang, though his duties were limited to basic chores, and that he was recently fired. Kershel's eyes widen at the mention of his affiliation with an SS-Rank party. Even if he only handled menial tasks, having that prestigious name on his resume might just open some doors. Relieved by this unexpected silver lining, Kurt is eager to complete the aptitude tests so that Kershel can assess his strengths and weaknesses. In this world, aptitudes are considered gifts bestowed by the divine, and if luck is on his side, he might discover a hidden talent today. Aptitudes range from a humble G rank to a dazzling triple S rank, with differences so vast that a G rank sword user can barely lift the damn blade without falling over, while an A rank warrior could cleave a rock in 2 without breaking a sweat. Kurt's heart races with excitement as he awaits his test results, but his hopes are dashed when every single combat-related aptitude is graded a G rank. The realization sinks in, he has no chance of ever excelling in a combat role. Devastated, Kurt feels his spirit crumble, but Kershel reassures him that there might still be a bright side. She explains that he could still possess a valuable trade skill, such as alchemy or blacksmithing. Unfortunately, the technician responsible for those particular aptitude tests is currently on vacation, meaning Kurt will have to wait another damn week to find out if he's good at anything at all. Kurt tells her straight up that he can't wait a whole damn week because he's literally one loaf of bread away from starving in the street, and if he doesn't find work today, he's done for. Kershel gets it, so she nods and points toward a stack of sandbags nearby, asking him to try lifting one. He walks over and grabs one of the bags, and the second his hands touch it, something weird happens. There's this strange pull if the sand inside sucked out a bit of his mana. Still, he lifts it without much effort, and that's good enough for Kershaw. If he can manage that, then she figures he's got what it takes to do some basic construction work. She tells him about a frontier town out in the Margraviate of Tacom that's currently hiring people to help rebuild the city walls, and she will write him a letter of recommendation, so he should be able to get a foot in the door. Kurt thanks her genuinely and heads out immediately to meet with the Margrave. When Kurt shows up, the Margrave gives him a once-over after reading the letter. The guy clearly doesn't think much of him. In his head, Kurt probably looks more like someone who'd break under pressure than build a wall. But the man's desperate because he needs all the help he can get, so he shrugs and decides to give the kid a shot. He then instructs Kurt to mix cement and use it to mend the wall, promising that his pay will reflect the volume of work completed. The Margrave says he'll come back later to check on things, and before leaving, he adds one last warning. If Kurt hasn't used at least half a barrel of cement by the time he returns, the pay's gonna be garbage. Kurt wants to ask something because no one said anything about needing to pour mana into the cement to make it stick, but he keeps his mouth shut. Maybe it's common knowledge and he just sounds stupid. Besides, he finds it weird that the quota is only half a barrel. That feels way too easy, so he makes up his mind. He's going to use as much damn cement as possible before the guy gets back. By the time the Margrave returns, he looks like he's seen a ghost. Not only has Kurt hit the quota, he's gone way beyond it, he's already finished an entire section of the wall. Kurt even apologizes, saying he could have done more, but he ran out of cement midway. The Margrave just stares at him, struggling to believe what he's seeing, so he squints at the top of the wall and asks how the hell Kurt managed to fix that part too. And with a happy face, Kurt says that he just chucked the cement up there and used a stick to spread it around. Normally, someone like the Margrave would have called Kurt a damn liar because finishing that much work in that short time sounds flat out impossible. But the wall speaks for itself, and clearly, Kurt made it work, so the man swallows his doubt and admits the truth for what it is. He asks Kurt how long he's planning to stick around, and Kurt replies that he only needs the job for a week. That surprisingly puts the Margrave in good mood, but then he tells Kurt that he's already done more than enough for the day and can head out for now. There's just one problem: he doesn't have enough money on him to pay Kurt properly. So instead he hands over a small pouch of coins and says he'll send the rest through the agency later. Kurt's eyes go wide because even that small pouch holds more than he ever earned back when he was busting his ass for the so-called hero party. Over the next few days, Kurt keeps showing up, working hard, fixing section after section of the wall. But suddenly, the Margrave informs him that his services are no longer needed. When Kurt asks why, the Margrave explains that the wall repair project was intended to provide employment for those in poverty. But Kurt's just too damn efficient means that if he keeps working, there won't be any jobs left for anyone else. The man's not mad. Hell, he even praises Kurt, saying his skill level looks like it's at least double S-Rank, maybe even triple. Honestly, he says that a guy like Kurt would be better off working in the royal capital, not patching walls out here. And with that, he gives Kurt a generous payout as compensation for ending the job so suddenly, then walks away without another word. But Kurt, being Kurt, completely misreads the situation. He thinks the Margrave fired him because he sucked, and that thought hits him harder than it should. Feeling defeated all over again, Kurt heads back to the temp agency and finds his mommy to tell her he got fired. Unfortunately, it's still going to be a few more days before they can evaluate his trade aptitudes. Just as they're talking, a commotion breaks out at the front desk. It looks like a girl is arguing with the receptionist, trying to set up a recruitment ad. The receptionist, clearly irritated, and tells her that no one in their right mind would agree to the kind of awful working conditions she's offering. But the girl doesn't back down and says that the receptionist should at least try to find someone, and her persistence starts creating a disturbance. Concerned, Kershaw goes over to see what the hell is going on. Her coworker quickly explains that this girl wants to hire a miner to dig through a mountain that's never been explored before, but she refuses to offer any upfront payment, and she only wants to pay if the excavation succeeds. Kershaw doesn't even try to hide her disbelief because no sane person would take a deal like that, and suggests that the girl should instead seek investors to develop the mine. The girl, however, retorts that she simply cannot do that because if she doesn't pay off the taxes by the end of the week, they're going to seize the mine. Just then, Kurt steps up and says he's crazy enough to take on a job like that. But Kurt says that back in his village, he helped out with mine excavation plenty of times, so he's no stranger to this work. Kershaw asks him if he's truly sure about accepting, pointing out that with the contract the girl's offering, there's a good chance he won't get paid at all. But before Kurt can even speak, the girl cuts in. She says she was hoping to hire a brawny dwarf, not a skinny boy who looks like he'd pass out lifting a shovel, so she feels kind of bad making him do it. Then again, hiring a dwarf would cost her at least 10 silver upfront, and she doesn't have that much, so she reluctantly decides to take Kurt after all. As the two of them head out, Kershell watches from her desk, a little worried. The job sounds like a mess, and she's not sure Kurt knows what he's getting into. Honestly, part of her thinks he'd probably make more working in a love hotel, and she even daydreams about spending a night with him and even says that she'd pay good money for one night with him. While she's still caught in that hot thought, her coworker snaps her out of it because a transfer just came in, and it's the payment for the work Kurt did on the wall for the Margrave. She was expecting maybe 50 silver, but instead it's 200 gold. She stares at the check for a second, like it's some kind of mistake, and she's so stunned that she nearly trips over the pile of sandbags next to her chair. Her coworker quickly warns her to watch her step, explaining that these aren't ordinary sandbags. They're used to measure a person's mana, and they get heavier when touched by someone with a large mana reserve. Typically, they don't react with normal folks, so Kilchill can pick them up easily. But she recalls seeing Kurt struggle with them a few days ago, and she starts to wonder if he's really just some lost kid looking for work. At the same time, Kurt and Eurytia head into the forest towards her campsite. When they arrive, Kurt grows a bit uneasy upon noticing there's only one tent. Eurytia assures him that the tent is spacious enough for the two of them to share a night's sleep, but Kurt protests, saying he'd never be able to fall asleep if he's lying next to a gorgeous girl like her. After hearing Kurt call her gorgeous, Eurytia is momentarily upset, thinking that he's just messing with her, but when she looks at him, she can tell he means it. She goes quiet for a moment, then hands him a boiled potato for dinner. It's nothing fancy, just a simple boiled potato, but having someone cook for Kurt after so long means the world to him. He's also thankful that Eurytia is sitting with him to share the meal, since Golnova and the others from the hero party always refuse to let Kurt eat in the same damn room with them. Later that night, Kurt and Eurytia retire to bed, but Kurt finds himself unable to sleep because Eurytia is dressed only in her underwear. He knows damn well he's not going to fall asleep with that going on, so he grabs his stuff and decides to sleep outside. And once he slips away, Eurytia, who had been feigning slumber, slowly opens her eyes. She had deliberately gone to bed in just her underwear to test whether Kurt would be a predator in his sleep, and now she's relieved to confirm he's a decent person. The next day, Eurytia steps out of the tent and finds Kurt sleeping by a tree. She feels a little bad for making him sleep out here, but then she notices that her jacket has been repaired. Kurt wakes up not long after, and Eurytia asks him with genuine curiosity if he was the one who fixed it, and he nods. She's surprised by how clean the stitching is, and she didn't expect him to know how to sew. Now she's wondering if he's really cut out for mining, but it's too late to back out, so they need to get to work. Kurt then asks if she's picked a place to start digging, but she says she was just going to pick a random spot and hope for the best. Kurt tells her that method's useless and says he knows a better way. He takes her to a rocky part of the mountain and starts looking around. Within minutes, he finds a chunk of stone filled with gemstones. Eurytia is shocked because she didn't expect results that fast, but Kurt keeps going, and in less than 10 minutes, he's found every gem in the area. She stares at the stones in disbelief because if she sold all of them, she could pay off her debt easily. But Kurt tells her she can't sell them. At first, she thinks it's because he found them, so they belong to him, but that's not it. He tells her the gems will be worth more if he turns them into magic crystals. She says that's a nice idea, but there are only 10 mages in the whole kingdom who can do that, but before she finishes talking, Kurt already has a finished crystal in his hand. Stunned into silence, Eurytia can barely process that not only did Kurt produce a magic crystal, but he did so in the blink of an eye, something even the most seasoned mages would struggle with for at least an hour. After Kurt finishes transforming all the raw gems into gleaming crystals, he finally agrees to let Eurytia take them to market. She then heads off to the city while he stays behind on the mountain, since he still has a few things he wants to take care of. And at the city's customs agency, she confidently declares that she wishes to sell her magic crystals, but given their extraordinary value, the agent immediately questions their origin. She knows there's no way he'd believe her if she said some random guy made them, so she pulls out her royal family emblem to shut him up. It's kind of a bluff because she hasn't worked for the royal family in a while, and they just never bothered taking the emblem back. But it works, and the agent lets her use the teleportation circle to head to the capital. Once she arrives, she visits the shop of an old friend named Mimiko. She tells her she's got some magic crystals to sell, so Mimiko checks them out, and at first glance, they don't seem like anything special. But after a closer look, she notices they're packed with 10 times the usual amount of mana, and that put their value at 10 gold each. Eurytia is speechless because Kurt gave her 50 of them. But Mimiko doesn't make a big deal about it, and she just counts out 500 gold and hands it over like it's nothing. But before Eurytia can leave, Mimiko has two conditions. First, she wants Eurytia to promise that any crystals like this will only be sold at her shop, because crystals this powerful can't just be allowed to circulate freely. Second, she wants to know who made them. Eurytia agrees to the first part without hesitation, But as for the name of the person who created them, she says she'll need to ask for his permission first. Mimiko, who also happens to be a court mage for the royal family, doesn't take that lightly. She tries to use her status to pressure Euryssia into talking, but Euryssia doesn't work for the royal family anymore, so she doesn't have to follow any of Mimiko's orders. Seeing she won't get anywhere by force, Mimiko tries a softer approach. She tells Euryssia that if the mage who made those crystals agrees to work for the royal family, they'll give him the title of Count and full access to the royal research lab. And with that, Euryssia leaves Mimiko's shop with the gold in hand, and the following morning, she returns to the mountain. But when she gets there, she stops in her tracks because Kurt built a whole damn house in just one day. Anyway, they sit inside the house and Euryssia brings up that one of her connections is looking to hire Kurt as a royal mage. If he agrees, he'll basically be treated like nobility, with a solid paycheck, full benefits, the whole package. Kurt can't wrap his head around the idea that someone would actually offer him something that big, but Euryssia swears it's legit. She asks him what he plans to do, and to her total disbelief, Kurt says he's going to turn it down. Honestly, she's stunned because turning down a royal mage position is just plain nuts. But Kurt says he doesn't feel like he's earned the right to be put above anyone else. In fact, he still wants to crawl back to the Flaming Dragon party and beg to be their damn errand boy again. And speaking of the Flaming Dragon crew, they're out there getting absolutely wrecked by some pissed-off tree monster. Golnova's fire spells are completely useless for some reason, so he yells at Martelfist to heal him. She's been trying for a while now, but her healing's barely working, and no one knows why. In desperation, Golnova tells their new recruit to throw out a fire spell, but surprise, the guy doesn't even know how to use fire magic, which by the way is supposed to be Golnova's whole job. Without Kurt around to glue the team together, their entire rhythm is shot, and Bandana's the only one who seems to realize just how deep in crap they really are. Back on Kurt's side, he's still working with Euryssia in the gem mines, and he casually tells her that he located a really solid vein yesterday, enough to keep digging for a while. Euryssia appreciates the hustle, but she worries he's pushing himself too hard after everything he did the day before. Kurt, being Kurt, brushes it off and says it's fine, he got 6 hours of sleep. That completely floors Euryssia, and now she's trying to calculate how the hell he had time to build a damn house and still get that much rest. But Kurt totally misreads her silence and assumes she's mad about him being lazy, so he apologizes and says he'll make up for it. Euryssia knows she should probably sit him down and explain how crazy strong he really is, but honestly, she still doesn't know how the hell to even start that conversation. So instead, the two of them grab their gear and head out to the mine to dig up more gems. Kurt then leads Euryssia to the area he scoped out earlier. To her, it looks like a plain old patch of forest, but Kurt insists there's a decent haul buried underneath. He does give her one weird warning though. Don't dig deeper than 500 meters, like that's something you could do by accident with a handpick and some free time. Before she can question him further, Kurt turns to leave. When she asks where he's headed, he tells her he's got another dig site in mind and they'll meet up again later. So Euryssia gets to work and she spends the entire day digging like a lunatic, and by the time the sun starts setting, she finally gets paid her a massive chunk of topaz. She's thrilled, and since she gave all the profits from the previous magic gems to Kurt because he found them, but this one's all hers. She could ask him to turn the gem into a magic stone and probably triple the value, but something in her stops her. She doesn't want to take advantage of him because he's already done enough. Still, curiosity gets the best of her and she heads out to check on Kurt. And while she expected him to overdo it, he always does, but what she finds goes way beyond that. The man didn't just dig, he straight up built an entire underground tunnel network in just 8 damn hours. Eventually, Kurt emerges from the tunnel, looking a little bummed. He tells her that the dig was kind of a bust because he only managed to grab a small amount of the material he was actually after, and says that everything else is just junk he's planning to toss. Euryssia takes a peek inside the cart, expecting rubble, but instead finds glittering metal that looks suspiciously not like garbage. She asks what it is, and Kurt casually replies that it is just mithril ore. Apparently in his hometown, that stuff was so common it got tossed aside like weeds. Euryssia just stares at him, unable to process the words coming out of his mouth. She's now dying to know where this guy even grew up if he thinks mithril is landfill material. Then she asks him what he was looking for, and Kurt pulls out a small glowing stone and tells her he was hoping to find orichalcum. He only dug up enough to fill a tiny box, but that's more than enough. This stuff is literally called the metal of the gods. 1 gram of it is worth a fortune, and Kurt just found a box of it like it's no big deal. At that point, Euryssia decides she's done with mining for the day and tells Kurt the topaz will cover her taxes, and just like that, their little contract is officially over. which means Kurt now has to go job hunting again, completely unaware that his bank account is stacked with more gold than most nobles see in a lifetime. While he's heading over to the agency, Kurt ends up bumping into Bandana. He's actually pretty happy to see her and asks what brings her out here. That's when she tells him she's not part of Flaming Dragon anymore, but there's a bit of a story behind that. Then we learn that after their last mission went completely sideways, Golnova stormed off to some fancy 5-star restaurant looking for a decent meal. Problem is, no matter how good the place was supposed to be, everything tasted like crap compared to Kurt's cooking. Golnova totally lost it, trashed the whole place, and walked out without paying. Later, he runs into Bandana in some back alley, and she calls him out for going way too far. But Golnova's too far gone to listen. He's obsessed. All he wants is food that lives up to what Kurt used to make, and he tells Bandana to track Kurt down and drag him back, even if she has to break every bone in his body. Yeah, dude's completely unhinged at this point. Rather than argue, Bandana just swipes his teleportation crystal and bolts. As she's getting away, she spots the city guards heading right for him. And now that he can't teleport out, he's definitely getting arrested for wrecking that restaurant. To make things worse, Marlefus also got summoned by the church for some unknown reason, so yeah, Flaming Dragon's done for. Bandana doesn't share every messy detail about Golnova losing his mind, but she gives Kurt enough to get the picture. Kurt's clearly upset to hear the party broke up. He was still holding on to the hope that he could go back to them someday, but now that dream's gone. Bandana, on the other hand, is confused about why he even wanted that in the first place, so Kurt explains that he really admired Golnova. He genuinely cared about him and somehow hasn't realized just how much of a bastard he really was, so losing the chance to work with him again makes him sad. Bandana doesn't get it at all, because to her, Golnova was just a cover, an excuse for her to stick close and keep an eye on Kurt. Anyway, since Kurt was already on his way to the guild office, Bandana figures he's job hunting. And lucky for him, she's got a lead. One of her friends runs a workshop and has been needing some extra help lately. And not just any workshop, this woman's an atelier master. That's a big deal because there are only a handful of them around, and they're basically as powerful and respected as a noble. She asks if Kurt's interested in taking the job, and of course he says he's down. So Bandana hands him a map, points him in the right direction, and sends him off toward his next adventure. After a bit, Kurt arrives at the place Bandana marked for him. It's supposed to be Atelier Master's workshop, but honestly, it just looks like a normal house. Nothing fancy or magical about it. He knocks on the front door, and to his surprise, it's answered by a tiny elf girl. For a second, Kurt's thrown off thinking this is the Atelier Master. But the girl quickly clears things up. She's not the master, just her assistant. Her name's Michelle, and she seems genuinely happy to see him. Kurt tells her he's here about the job, and Michelle lights up like it's the best news she's heard all week. She says she's been swamped lately and could really use an extra set of hands. She leads him straight into the kitchen, and the moment he walks in, a pungent smell hits him like a wall, something like a mix between moldy herbs and your grandma's foot. Michelle's immediately apologetic, saying the place is a disaster because her boss has had her running around non-stop, so she hasn't had a moment to tidy up. Before Kurt can even reply, a voice from somewhere else in the house yells out Michelle's name. She dashes off, leaving Kurt alone in the battlefield of a kitchen, and asks him to help clean up a bit. It's not exactly the magical apprenticeship Kurt had in mind, but cleaning isn't hard, so he rolls up his sleeves and gets to it. About half an hour later, the kitchen's spotless. Kurt's done his part, but Michelle still hasn't come back to give him any further instructions, so he starts wandering the house to figure out what to do next. He comes across a room in one of the hallways and gently knocks. A girl inside casually tells him to come in. When he opens the door, he's not ready for what he sees. A nearly naked girl standing beside her bed like it's the most normal thing in the world. Kurt immediately panics and apologizes, backing up as fast as possible, but she waves it off like it's no big deal. He quickly explains that he's just looking for Michelle, and the girl calmly says she's probably down in the basement. Kurt's about to take off again, but something stops him. He spots a strange mark on her stomach, a very dark, unnatural one. His brain immediately clicks. That's a curse. He asks if she'd let him examine it, and she agrees without hesitation. Kurt kneels beside her and gently places his hand over the mark, trying to sense the depth of the curse. Curses like this usually mess up internal organs, and he figures eating must be painful for her. But surprisingly, her stomach didn't seem too damaged because he heard the growl of her stomach. Hearing that, Kurt offers to head back to the now-clean kitchen and cook something for her. Elsewhere, Eurytia is sitting down with Mimiko to talk about the whole Mithril and Orichalcum situation Kurt dropped on them. What's alarming isn't just that he found them, it's that he didn't even process them into magic-grade crystals this time, and they're still valued at over 50,000 gold coins. That kind of value is starting to seriously stress Eurytia out, So she turns to Mimiko and asks what would happen if the world found out what Kurt is capable of, and Mimiko doesn't sugarcoat it. Best case, someone kidnaps him and uses him like a personal gold mine. Worst case, he ends up with a knife in his back because people see him as too dangerous to keep around. Mimiko then flips the question back on Eurytia and asks what exactly she is planning to do with Kurt, so Eurytia explains that she's been thinking about registering him as an atelier master. It give him enough recognition and legal protection to keep people from messing with him, and she plans to stick around as his bodyguard. But the only problem is Kurt himself, because he's completely blind to his own talent, and even worse, he keeps thinking of himself as nothing special. If she doesn't act fast, he's going to end up in a world of trouble, just because he doesn't know how rare he actually is. Meanwhile, back at the workshop, Kurt has just finished cooking a warm bowl of porridge for the mysterious girl he ran into earlier. At that moment, Michelle and the atelier master Ophelia come walking up from the basement. They both freeze the second they see the kitchen. Not only is it spotless, it smells amazing. Ophelia blinks at the scene, totally thrown off. She points at the stove and asks about the food, so Kurt casually tells her that the girls upstairs said she was hungry, so he whipped something up. Ophelia's expression shifts slightly when she realizes which girl he's talking about, and she immediately makes Kurt swear to keep quiet about her. Kurt agrees, not really seeing the big deal. After that, Ophelia thanks him for the help and hands him 3 silver coins and tells him he can head home for the day. Kurt stares at the money, completely shocked. He thinks it's way too generous for just cleaning up a mess and making a quick meal, but Ophelia insists. She says he earned every bit of it and asks him to come back tomorrow. A short while later, Ophelia brings the bowl of porridge to the girl's room and gently reminds her that she's supposed to stay out of sight. Still, since Kurt doesn't come off as dangerous, Ophelia figures is probably fine this time. Lizzie hasn't touched the food yet, so Ophelia offers to taste test it for poison, just to be safe. But Lizzie shakes her head because there's no need. Even though she only spent a short time talking to Kurt, she got a gut feeling that he's not the type to do something shady. And honestly, with how far the curse has spread, a little poison wouldn't make much difference now. She spent her whole life second-guessing everyone around her, but just this once, she wants to put her faith in someone. Ophelia stays quiet for a moment, then lets her go ahead and eat. But right after Lizzie takes her first bite, she starts sweating heavily and suddenly collapses to the floor. Panic strikes Ophelia, and she's absolutely certain Kurt did poison her, so she's already gearing up to hunt him down. But then Lizzie sits up like nothing happened and says she feels amazing and the curse is completely gone. Ophelia stands there frozen because what the hell just happened? That curse was incredibly advanced, the kind of thing that takes years of research and a team of experts to even weaken, let alone undo. But it was just gone, and all it took was a damn bowl of porridge. Meanwhile, miles away, the shady organization that cursed Lizzie is holding an emergency meeting. They just got word that their curse has been lifted, and now their whole plan to quietly assassinate her has gone up in flames. Since their subtle approach failed, they're now preparing to take more extreme action. Later that night, Ophelia and Lizzie walk into Mimiko's shop with something urgent on their minds. Lizzie pulls back her hood, and the moment Mimiko and Eurytia see her face, their jaws drop. They recognize her immediately. She's the 3rd princess of the kingdom. Ophelia explains that someone placed a deadly curse on Lizzie in an attempt to take her out. They still don't know who's behind it, but considering Lizzie is the only child born from the union between the king and Princess Françoise of Gurumaku, her existence is basically the peace treaty between both kingdoms. So if someone wanted to reignite that conflict, she'd be a prime target. Mimiko is relieved Lizzie survived, but also baffled. How the hell does she break a curse like that? Lizzie gives credit where it's due. She didn't lift it herself, and it was a man named Kurt. The moment Eurytia and Mimiko hear that name, their expressions change instantly and their eyes go wide. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.